2023. My name is Julie. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations. And we're really excited. This is our 4th year of doing these HU talks. And so I think it's a firmly established tradition of homecoming now. So grateful for you all to have joined us. Just a note, make plans to join us for all the other HU talks this week. There are 23 of them, and they'll be covering as many topics that you can think of or that you would want to hear. And so there truly is something for you. Tickets are on sale for the Cowboy Lounge, which takes place on Friday at 5:30 here in the sub. And that is sponsored by the Alumni Association. It's open to everyone, the community, alumni, staff, and faculty. And we have a silent auction that features some amazing vacation packages, designer, really extravagant gifts, and some simple things as well. So come and support our students. All the proceeds raised go toward supporting student success at Highlands. Tickets are available online at nmhufoundation.org, or you find them at the door. So with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our first HU presenter, Jacob Avery. Dr. Avery teaches a variety of courses in sociology and is the chair of faculty research of the Faculty Research Committee, and is involved in multiple efforts to promote diversity and inclusion on campus, and has been at Highlands for 4 years. So with that, please welcome Dr. Avery as he presents his HU talk on the 7 things I learned from Highlands students.
All right, thank you so much, and good morning, everybody, both those who are here in person and joining us via Zoom. I want to welcome all of you. And before getting into the heart of my talk, I want to begin with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, including the 19 Pueblos, the Apache, the Comanche, the Dene, the Kiowa, and the Ute. We pay our respects to elders both past and present. And we recognize these peoples were displaced to accommodate others in the name of progress. With humility, we recognize and respect all Indigenous peoples, their history, and their ties to the land. I want to express what an honor it is to kickstart this series of HU talks for Homecoming 2023. The NMHU Foundation and Alumni Office has put together a program, and really for the benefit of us all. And I look forward to attending several of the HU talks this week. So my name is Jacob Avery. I'm a faculty member here at Highlands in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice. My talk today will be about 7 things I have learned from Highlands students. Giving this talk emerged from some intense personal reflection about my teaching and mentoring practices. While thinking carefully about teaching and mentoring, I realized how much time I have dedicated to figuring out how to get students to learn better. At the same time, I was really truly searching for how I construct meaning in my work as an educator. I've been grappling with how my background influences why I do what I do in the classroom. And I've been exploring the reasoning and motivation for wanting to earn a PhD and become a college professor in the first place. In part, what I realized that PhD training, at least the kind I underwent, it can fill people with certainty that their opinions are valid and well-earned. After all, to earn a PhD is to undertake a struggle with research, analysis, writing, methods, theory, interpretation, etc. And in the end, the PhD carrying professor has ostensibly earned the right and profess in a college classroom. When I first started teaching, I worried intensely about saying the right thing, about sounding authoritative and professional, generally feeling like I had all the answers. And this came at a cost. It prevented me from paying close attention to classroom dynamics, relationships with students, and fully appreciating what students bring to the proverbial table. While I was thinking about my teaching and mentoring practices, I began making a list of things students have taught. And in the process of doing so, I inverted the traditional student-teacher roles. And very quickly, I realized just how much I've learned. And so my talk today, titled 7 Things I Learned from Highlands Students, is a testament to the talents of Highlands University students. I'm going to highlight 7 things I learned. But I should mention I could have easily listed 10 things, or 17 things, or 23 things I have learned. But I settled on 7 because, well, I like the number 7. The number 7 has a sort of sacred quality to it. So 7 it is, and here we go. So, lesson number 1, the importance of family and relationships. Now, this may seem like a cliche, and maybe it will even strike you as being boring or dull on the surface. But this lesson, the importance of family and relationships, expresses an important truth. One that might be difficult for many educators to hear. There really are more important things than schoolwork. Arguably, one of these things more important than schoolwork is family and relationships. In every academic year since I've been a faculty member, I'm reminded of family and relationships. One way I'm reminded of the importance of family and relationships is that sadly, and without fail, a student will come to my office hours or write me a tender email and inform me of a loved one's passing. Sometimes it's a parent, other times it's a grandparent, and other times it's a brother, a sister, a friend, and it always breaks my heart to hear this. And over the years, I've developed a pretty standard reply to students who are lost. I tell students to go be with their family. That honoring their loved one is more important than any missed assignments in my class. That being with family is more than anything going on in my class. Grieving that loss and celebrating that life is much more important than anything going on in my class. So of course, family isn't always perfect. Families aren't always and forever filled with love. But I do believe deep in my bones that family is an elementary social unit, a nucleus of civilization, and family can be an important source of love and belonging. Family is, of course, many things. There's biological family, there's the families we. As a sociologist, I know family comes in many kinds of formations. But the overall point remains the same. Family, social connections are deeply meaningful. And family is an important source of our overall life satisfaction. So without question, Highlands students repeatedly demonstrate this life lesson, the importance of family and relationships. Number 2, serving others gives meaning to our lives. Here I have the privilege to teach classical social theory. One of the classical social theorists that students and I spend time studying is Emile Durkheim, who wrote extensively about the power of social bonds and the factors that shape our social connectedness with one another. One thing that Durkheim noticed was that as society becomes increasingly modernized, traditional ways of integrating individuals into the community are vanishing before our very eyes. Simultaneously, modern society tends to place a premium on pursuing personal pleasure and happiness. You have probably heard the phrase, do you, or whatever feels right to you. Or if you listen to Top 40 radio, you have heard Miley Cyrus sing, I can buy myself flowers. And indeed, in our modern world, there's much emphasis on pursuing your version of happiness. But Emile Durkheim believed happiness was an unattainable goal, at least in the static sense. Because after all, who among us is immune to sadness and sorrow and tragedy? The answer is nobody. Sadness, sorrow, tragedy are embedded into the human condition. And in fact, as Nietzsche reminds us, to live is to suffer. One day, while reviewing the basic lessons of Durkheim, I asked students, if you take seriously Durkheim's ideas, what would be the solution to various mental health crises that we are facing here in the United States? Eventually, there was a brave student who raised their hand and said, serving others. serving others. What an incredible answer. And indeed, perhaps serving others would be the solution to many mental health problems in modern society. There are numerous upsides to serving others. It gets us out of our own heads. It encourages human-to-human bonding and promotes empathy. And it might even instill people with deep meaning and purpose. Muhammad Ali, the greatest of all time, who was not only a gifted boxer, but blessed with a brilliant mind, one of the brilliant things he said was, service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Serving others gives meaning to our lives. Lesson number 3, intentional flexibility. I learned this one while teaching during COVID-19 and other educational emergencies over the past few years, which continue to affect us to this day. Well, I don't need to dwell in great depth about COVID-19, given that we all lived through it and we're continuing to live through it. It was a global pandemic that prompted an international response. The COVID-19 pandemic caused worldwide disruptions of social and economic conditions, led to supply chain issues, curfews, lockdowns, death, loss, and devastation. In higher education, the pandemic prompted faculty to implement practices that fundamentally redesigned our teaching. And indeed, faculty quickly transitioned their courses to include remote, hybrid, and asynchronous modalities. And if there's one critical lesson I learned during COVID-19 and other educational emergencies like the Hermit's Peak and Cap Canyon wildfires, it was flexibility with how I approach my courses and deliver content. To this day, I realize I'm in a bid to capture students' attention, and I must compete with all kinds of distractions going on in lives. Additionally, I've come to realize that not all students learn the same, and I understand why it's important to intentionally design my courses to accommodate as many students as possible. And in so many words, I've learned, and I'm still learning, how to be intentionally flexible. Being intentionally flexible is an important lesson I learned by teaching during COVID and the wildfires. And I'm guessing many educators and non-educators alike learned this lesson too, and are still learning this lesson, even if you didn't call it intentional flexibility. Number 4, the same thing can mean totally different things for different people. The same thing can mean totally different things for different people. I want to illustrate this lesson by sharing a parable, known as the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Some of you may be familiar with this parable, or you've heard some version of it before. Regardless, the parable of the blind man and the elephant tells the story of a group of blind men who have never experienced an elephant before. And the men learn to imagine what the elephant is like by approaching the elephant and touching it. Each one of the blind men feels a different part of the elephant's body, such as the leg, or the ears, or the tusk. Then each man describes the elephant based upon their unique vantage point, and they share the descriptions of the elephant. The first blind man reaches out and touches the side of the huge animal, and he says, "An elephant is smooth and solid like a wall." Another blind man felt the elephant's tusk. "I was right," he decided. "This creature is sharp and deadly like a spear." And so on and so forth. With each blind man feeling a different part of the elephant's body, but only one part, such as the side or the tusk or the tail. The men then describe the elephant based on their limited experience and their unique vantage point. And they share their descriptions of the elephant, which are quite different from one another. In some versions of the parable, the blind men come to suspect that the other person is dishonest. And they argue vigorously with one another, each claiming that their description of the animal is the truth, and the other men are being deceitful or false. So, what's the moral of the parable? That humans tend to claim truth based on their limited subjective experience and ignore other people's subjective experiences, which may be equally true. I bear witness to this almost every time I enter a classroom with Highlands students. Because I teach sociology, our subject matter is society itself, in which there are very things that seem to be capital T true. Absolutely and without question. For example, I can show students a picture and ask them to conduct a visual. And invariably, different students zero in on different elements of the picture and formulate their unique interpretations of what they see, all of which tend to be valid. Or I can display a table of social statistics and ask the students to provide an interpretation of what those statistics mean. Also, invariably, students extract different kinds of meaning from those numbers. This is just another way of saying where you sit determines what you see. And not only does this apply in a sociology classroom, but for life more generally. Given people's different belief templates, value systems, life experiences, different ways of constructing meaning, the same thing can mean totally different things for different people. All right, lesson number 5. Assume people know things you do not. Assuming people know things you do not, this lesson has been quite difficult for me to learn, especially when we're referring to a professor learning from their students. As I mentioned at the beginning of the talk today, an advanced degree can testify to the fact that we, as holders of that degree, are experts in our fields of study. Consequently, it can be tempting to assume that we know what there is to know about our subject matter, and the students, well, they're here to learn from us. And of course, some amount of certainty is probably a good thing, for it can inspire confidence in others. And yet, blind certainty and closed-mindedness can prove to be hazardous. Assuming people know things I do not is a lesson I learned slowly, incrementally, and sometimes even painfully. To assume people know things I do not requires a healthy amount of humility. And being a sociology professor, I have the privilege to discuss pressing public issues in our society. Everything from race and class inequalities, to the complexities of gender identity, to the patterns of crime and punishment, rent burden, housing insecurity, political polarization, among many other so-called social problems. Unfailingly, what I have come to learn is students have powerful and penetrating insights about these topics. Because of their unique life experiences and perspectives, students frequently share things with me I've never thought about before, that I've never considered before, that I've never known before. And of course, assuming people know things we do not can create a heavy mental tax. We might hear things that conflict with our pre-existing templates and create cognitive dissonance, and that's painful. But being open to change one's mind, being open to hearing new information, strikes me at least as a central part of the learning enterprise. And what's more, it seems absolutely essential for personal growth and development. And over time, I've learned it's okay to not have all the answers, that it's okay to open myself up, to be vulnerable and be willing to listen and learn from my students, that it's more than okay to assume people know things that I do not. Lesson number 6, be quick to listen and slow to judge. I don't think I'm being out of bounds when I say that many people struggle with knowing how to listen. Most people have ears that hear well enough, but do they utilize their powers of hearing to really listen to what other people are saying? According to the Harvard Business Review, the average person only remembers about half of what they heard within 8 hours after hearing it. And as the more time that goes by, the average person remembers even less of what they have heard, even if they were carefully listening. Certainly, as teachers and educators, we want students to listen to what we have to say. But how carefully do we listen to what students are communicating to us? Sometimes when we listen, we might be inclined to search for evidence which proves us right in what we already believe. This is the confirmation bias psychologists have dedicated so much time and energy toward understanding. And in the context of a college classroom, it seems imperative to search for evidence to prove ourselves wrong. This type of effort is not easy, for it requires a generous outlook and withholding evaluation. Indeed, being slow to judgment can be difficult to do. It is a challenge to stay conscious and focused day in and day out, and to really truly listen to what people are saying to us. So when students are not attending my classes, or they're not completing the assignments, or if they look preoccupied instead of paying attention to my lectures, or if they aren't demonstrating enthusiasm, it can be very tempting to assume the worst. It can be very easy to be cynical. It can seem natural to rush to judgment. But what I've learned over the years is that when I reach out to these students, meet with them during office hours, or ask them, how's it going? I typically learn highly relevant information that helps explain behavioral patterns. And so, what is this ultimately taught me? To not be so certainties. Because frequently, a large percentage of the stuff that I was certain of turned out to be wrong or misguided. I misapprehended the situation entirely. And I have learned this lesson the hard way. So being quick to listen and slow to judgment has meant for me giving people the benefit of the doubt, not rushing to judgment, not being so convinced I know the truth of the matter, especially if I only have partial information or understanding, which is frequently the case. Because after all, how often do we know all the details about a person, a situation, or why people do what they do? Like I mentioned in the parable of the elephant, we're all limited by our vantage points and experiences. And so it's wise to not only be quick to listen to others, but slow to judge as well. All right. Lastly, number 7, walk the talk. This is another way of saying practice what you preach. Practicing what I preach and walking my talk has been a critical lesson for me to learn, especially as an educator, because I hope students will listen to what I have to say, implement it into their lives, and become a better human being and citizen as a result. Like all other lessons I mentioned today, I did not simply learn this one overnight. It happened slowly, sometimes even painfully. For years, in my intro to sociology class, I asked students to write a culminating essay where they had to answer the basic question, who are you? The assignment, simple and straightforward at first glance, proves to be quite difficult. So no matter what stage in the life course people are at, having an answer to that simple question, who are you, is difficult, paradoxically so. But frequently, students rise to the occasion and they write powerful essays testifying to who they are along the lines of their racial and ethnic identity, their social class background, their gender, citizenship, age, life experiences, and I relish reading these student essays. One semester, several years ago, a student came to me and asked, Professor Avery, we told you who we are. When do we get to hear about who you are? And that question dropped like a bomb. Here I've been asking students to engage in deep existential reflection about who they are and tell me all about it, yet I did not provide them with the same. In other words, there was a trade imbalance in our relationship. And so almost immediately I wrote an essay about who I am and shared it with my students. And from that point forward, I've been very mindful about what I ask students to do in my classes. Increasingly, I consider whether or not I too would be willing to do what I'm asking students to do. I want to make sure I'm not subjecting students to engage in work that I myself would be unwilling to do. So in other words, I want to make sure I'm practicing what I preach and that I'm walking my talk. So as an educator, I believe it's of paramount importance to establish congruence between what I say and what I do, putting my words into action, showing I mean what I say by actively doing it myself. And if students are expected to do what I ask, then I have learned it's important for me to walk my talk, first and foremost, and to demonstrate my own willingness to live my philosophy, to practice what I preach, and walk the talk. So, in conclusion, here again are the 7 lessons I learned from students at Highlands University. And as I mentioned at the beginning of today's talk, this list could have been at least twice as long. But in the interest of time, I've condensed it to 7 lessons, and hopefully there's something for everybody in this list. Now, of course, it's possible some of these lessons might seem uninspiring or dull on the surface, and I will concede that point. However, I steadfastly believe that these lessons stand for deeper, broader, more serious ideas. And I felt obligated to share them with you. They provide powerful testimony to the talents, the intelligence, the wisdoms of Highlands students. My hope is these lessons demonstrate the importance of remaining attentive and alert in the modern world, of being welcoming and broad-minded and inclusive, of inspiring people to think about big ideas, of using our brains to the best of our ability, of being civically engaged, and last but not least, of walking the talk. It is unimaginably hard to do this, to integrate such lessons into our everyday lives. And in conclusion, doing so really is the job of a lifetime. So thank you once again for spending part of your morning with me. Have a wonderful Monday, have a wonderful week, and of course, a wonderful homecoming. And if anybody has questions, comments, I'm happy to hear them now. So thank you very much.
No questions yet, but we have a couple messages in the chat. Thanks, Jacob, for sharing your experience. Really appreciate your perspective from Erica Durkis. And then lots of thank yous popping up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. I appreciate you joining us this morning. Do I get a question from Dean Kempner?
Sure. So is there a good piece of sociological analysis for number 5 that you really were blown away by what your students knew about society that you didn't yourself have insight into?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could cite probably quite a few examples of that. I mean, I think whenever I talk about racial dynamics, for instance, at Highlands, I always learn something new. And I tend to be less didactic in that lesson when I talk about race, and much more conversational. And I give students a platform to, convey their own experience. And yeah, it's impossible. So, what exists in the minds and experiences of all the students. And so whenever I can open up things in that way, I always learn something powerful from each one of them.
Have we seen a shift pre-COVID to post-COVID? Do you think about those insights?
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'd have to think about that some more. That was a question I suppose I wasn't prepared to answer. Thinking about like what could be the difference, if any, between pre-COVID and post-COVID. Are you thinking especially along the lines of race and racial?
Well, anything. I mean, obviously the kind of interactions our students have had with each other and with society changed so much for 2 to 3 years.
For
and
sure.
They go back and forth. I wonder, I haven't had a chance to teach in the last years.
Yeah.
I just wonder what new things our students know about society having been through that experience.
Yeah.
So unique.
Yeah. I'm certainly gonna think about that once more. And I know like how I have been teaching courses has shifted, and thinking about how to engage people via Zoom, again, being very intentional about how to do that and create a kind of communal conversation over Zoom, which isn't always easy. But in terms of a compare and contrast pre-COVID, post-COVID, certainly something I want to think about some more now, and I'll probably pay attention to a lot more given the question. Yes.
Well, I've been at the university for so many years. I think I got a degree in, but anyway, I'm still a graduate student in political science. The whole COVID thing, we would meet, we would talk, we would have parties, we would meet at the skillet, we'd discuss active debates, people would look you in the eye. Then we tell you what, nobody's doing it. Nobody even says hi. Nobody, I took in a lot of different students that live with me because I only live down the street. I took on different students And they were the most closed people. They wouldn't even say hello. They wouldn't say, honey, I'm home. None of it. This whole veil came over, and I noticed it. I noticed it. It's the residual blowback of not having, like, hello, well, I'm an extrovert, but what a difference, man. And I'm really discouraged.
Yeah,
If I speak out, because I'm kind of opinionated and older and but oh man, it's closed. It's closed. And
yeah,
I'm really upset about it. And just to get people out and have face to face, they're afraid to have face to face. They were before because of the youth and newness of college and all that. Boy, I tell you, we got a long way to go.
yeah. When Dean Kempner raised his question, I guess I was thinking specifically along the lines of race, but a core sociological topic is social interaction. And thinking about how COVID has modified our routine interactions with one another. I mean, that's undeniable. That it's had an influence, everything from shaking hands to, those routine pleasantries, to, maybe more self-isolation, uncomfortableness in crowds. I mean, you go on and on, for sure. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, well, thank you so much for being here, both face to face and those of you on Zoom. I appreciate it very much. And thank you again for the organizers for putting together a wonderful program.
Well, thank